Brilliant. So we're back at the Resonance Centre for our last Flourishing Monday of the year, I think it is. And so today's topic's all about social prescribing, contracts and developing strategic links. We've run this whole series of Flourishing Mondays over the last 3 months or more, and we're looking forward to a really exciting part of different thoughts and perspectives really on how you break into things like social prescribing. What is it, and how people get into looking at contracts as opportunities alongside wider grant funding and trading and other income generation options that people use to sustain what they do. And yeah, unpicking how you develop the strategic links to get there, I believe is what we're up to today. So Shelley's going to be chairing the session, so I'm going to hand back to Shelley to kick us off with our questions.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to find out who's on our panel. So if I could ask you to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about your background and experience in this area, please.
Hi, so I'm Nicci. I'm not sure, I've hopefully seen most of you. I've been on quite a few of these. Yeah, I know, yeah. So I run an organisation called Profit for Purpose. It does what it says on the tin. So supports people and social enterprises to generate profit and reinvest that profit back into the community. So I've been doing this 25 years now, so a long time. My background is within health. So I've worked with Department of Health to originally set up personal health budgets, which is where social prescribing came from originally. Sort of supported the first spin out of personal health budgets, and work a lot on social value commissioning contracts and on social prescribing and integrated care budgets. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, Nicci's our resident Jill of all trades. We've been having her back every week with all sorts, but we do it pretty closely together anyway. So as you heard, I'm Nickala. I can't claim to be an expert on social prescribing. It's always been a bit of a mystery to me. It's like, what's it going to be called, for this set of 5 years or 10 years? And I can think of the various iterations that have come before us now. But I've been working in the VCSE sector for 20 years or 22. Prior to that, in the private sector somewhat. In terms of this topic, just quickly, I mean, Flourish, we'll come on to this with other things, but I've worked with other organisations that are very embedded in this world. So I worked for an organisation called Bubble Enterprises way back when, they still exist, and they work all around enterprise and mental health. So working in sort of mental health improvement and adult health and social care was a big part of what we were doing through enterprise solutions at individual level through to working with NHS Trust at that time. I've worked and set up a health spa and wellbeing centre and a number of social enterprise cafes that have all linked in and out of this sort of theme. And the health spa and wellbeing centre that we set up in Liverpool at Blackburn House, then led me on years later to set up this pop-up spa, community pop-ups things some people will know, where we have a team of holistic therapists and we train people up in complementary health, mainly women, single mums, people who it's like, if we can get you earning 20 to 30 pounds an hour instead of minimum wage, that would be much better. So yeah, in the last year alone, we've trained up about 35 women across Manchester and Salford. So we've got our growing team around creating holistic health and wellbeing days and affordable therapies, counselling and holistic therapies. And then Flourish itself, we'll come on to here, but we've got different council related partners, and we're just getting into taking on 2 premises, for anyone who doesn't know, these derelict parts stations, one in Heaton Chapel and one in Broadbottom, and there's a lot of strategic partnership work going on around that, so we might get to cover a bit of that. So although I'm not some strategic boffin on this stuff, I have to monkey around with it an awful lot to make sure what we do and the people that we support, can up their game basically in terms of what they do and how they do it.
Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm Kerry. So I run out of shots. I run Brilliant Thing, which is a community interest company that I've set up with my mum and my 2 sisters. And we do strategy design and we do culture making work with charities and public sector teams. And we're really interested in co-production, so making the thing with the people that are going to benefit from the thing, and collaboration, so working across sectors, and social value, so working with businesses so that we can do that community support work with businesses as well. But I guess connected to social prescribing, I've kind of been on all sides of it. So I've worked in the commissioning teams that commission social prescribing. I've worked in the sort of organisations, so the CVSs, which are commissioned to organise the community development part and the funding part of social prescribing. I've also worked in charities that have been commissioned or funded to deliver social prescribing work, and I'm involved in a number of voluntary roles which are working with kind of the unseen bit of social prescribing, so the bit that probably doesn't get funded but is really kind of vital part. And my sister Tessa, who's one of our directors at Brilliant Thing, is a social prescriber. So she worked in a CVS as a social prescriber, and then got TP'd over exactly the same job but in a GP surgery. So there's some really interesting experiences there around how that's differed. And then I also work with a company called Altogether Better. So I do some associate work there, and that's working with GP practices to develop what's called collaborative practice. So connecting clinicians and community staff within the practice and patients to develop some of that like informal grassroots social prescribing type connection work actually in the GP practice.
It's not the Emperor's but it's like the mystique of it. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, there's lots of different like layers, I guess. And I've got a bit of information about all of them.
That's fab. And Kerry's been a mentor of ours through Flourish for over 5 years. It's great to have you back. Yeah. Get involved in one of these men.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Oh my morning. My name is Charlotte Leonhardsen, and I'm the social prescribing lead for Greater Manchester. So I work within the Greater Manchester ICP. That's the Integrated Care Partnership. It's basically the new structure for health and social care. So that job role means that I'm working closely with all the social prescribing providers that we've got across Greater Manchester, and that's both in the VCSE sector, but also in GP practices. And I will come into that a little bit more, sort of, I think we've divvied it up a little bit, that I'm going to give you an overview of what social prescribing look like in Greater Manchester, and Kerry's going to go a bit more into what it's like, being an organisation around commissioning. So my background is I've done a lot of different things around social prescribing. I've been working in the Midlands around physical activity and social prescribing to try and look at how systems can make it possible for people to be more active, but being supported through social prescribing to do that. And that is a lot more messy than it sounds. And I've also worked at a charity organisation, a voluntary organisation in Glossop, my hometown, where I actually met Kerry, on the collaboration around GP practices and volunteers in GP practices. And I was managing the social prescribing team and engaging with health and social care partners, etc. So a little bit of a mixed bag.
Thanks, Charlotte. We'll stay with you if that's okay.
Oh, yes.
Let's start by talking, just give us an overview of what do we mean by social prescribing and commissioning, and whether you want to divvy this up between you and what would you say the difference is?
So I would say that it couldn't be more different from each other. So if we boil it down, so social prescribing is basically to support a person to connect with any activity that is of benefit for that person's health and well-being. And you're right, you've all sort of alluded to the fact that social prescribing I know you from somewhere, and I'm not sure where, sorry.
You mean?
Yeah.
I live in Hadfield.
Oh, that's right, the Glossop Leisure Centre. Yeah, okay, sorry. You know when you sit and think, okay, anyway. So where did I get? So yeah, connecting people up to activities to benefit their health and well-being. And it's been around for many, 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 many years. And NHS England basically just a couple of years ago decided to name it something, social prescribing. oh, I know such and such a body down in the corner, they're really good for this. Oh, I know this person, I think you'd get along well. Or, oh, I know how to get into this, you know, mental health support, etc. Sounds like you're really well embedded in that anyway. So it's been on forever. And then in Greater Manchester, about 6 years ago, there was it transitioned into a health and social care partnership. So basically in GM, they tried to get health and social care to work more better together, integrated. So it wasn't like two big pots of money and working sort of very separate. And as part of that, they were investing some monies in supporting people in a different way. And social prescribing was one of those. So on the same side of Glossop and in where we both were at the time, and Oldham and Salford, they invested monies in setting up a social prescribing team that was funded by the Integrated Care Foundation Trust of the hospital, by health. They gave some money into it. And those teams have worked from a voluntary organisation ever since. So they were all embedded there and worked from there because they recognised that they know the communities the best, they know the neighbourhood. They've got a lot of experience in supporting people. And then 4 years ago, NHS England found out this is a really good idea. We need to do something about all the people that go to the GP practice. The GP can't help them. Their challenges is about everything else but medical issues. So they decided that it would cut down on the time for the GP, so resources, finances, and the good outcome was actually that people get some of the support they need through a social prescriber. So they take that time out, you know, to talk to the individual, figure out what's actually happening in your life. So what's impacting? Why is it hard to commit to a job? Why is it, what is it that's going on that makes it hard to look after your diabetes, etc. And a lot of that is around finances, around loneliness, it's mental health. You know, there's a lot of issues from our lives that are impacting, and this very sort of parenting approach to patients, saying you just need to stop eating chocolate, you just need to move more, you just need to lose weight. If you have all these other struggles, it's not really going to be on the top of your priority. So we need to remove some of all those challenges first before you can start really focusing on your health. So, so that meant that they invested in what we call the travel agent, the social prescriber. So you will now find social prescribing link workers in 64 out of 65 PCMs. So PCMs are the cluster of GP practices within an area. So you will have a social prescriber in all those GP practices, but you will also have the old social prescribing team. So they are based at the VCSE organisations. So each borough is slightly different in how it looks. So the first thing I would advise you to do is to go and look at what your locality looks like. But you're also welcome to share my details, and anybody who want to know what happens in your area, you can just send me an email. Suss it out. I think I'll stop there. Just breathe, because I can talk for a long time.
Just a quick one, how if somebody wants to sell.
So first thing would be to ask your GP, do they have a social prescribing link worker there?
And there's a tough question here, but if you got if you can barely get an appointment with your GP, I'm very lucky I can. Do they really want us all ringing them up to say that have they got the time to answer our questions on these topics? I guess is
What, the social prescribing link worker or the receptionist?
Yeah, you know, if you ring them up or walk in, will they go on? We're just creating another headache for them. We try and find this stuff out.
Well, I guess it depends what your GP practice is like. So I know a couple of them you can actually book an appointment with a link worker on the app, but that's not a lot of them. So the best port of call is to just call the receptionist up and find out if they're there. Some GP practices are rubbish and really appalling, and some are really good and making it easier. And you know, it's hard to say we've got 200 knots, so it's quite different.
And you said that there's also the old social prescribers. How do you identify those?
So you can either email me or you can go to your local infrastructure organisation, BCS, if you're going to say, just Google it. I know we've got Oldham Action Together, if there's anybody in Oldham. In Tameside, it's Tameside Action Together. There was Bury, somebody from Bury here. Yeah, Bury VCS.
VCS.
FA. And who else do we have? Yeah. So in Stockport, it's actually Viaduct. So it's GP fed, but you just call the GP practice up there and they sort of direct you into that. Stockport is really strong in this area.
And in South Manchester.
So that is Be Well, Big Life.
Yeah. They've actually got, I'm going to talk about some funding that they've got. They got 10 out of the 14 PCNs, so there are 4 PCNs where they directly host them. So again, call them up and That's brilliant. Kerry, do you want to talk to us a little bit about?
Yeah. Okay, so just breaking down social prescribing just a little bit further, I think it might be interesting to like paint a picture of a perfect social prescribing world and all the bits in it, because I think it's really important that as organisations you identify which bit of this are you actually interested in. So in an ideal world, there would be a pot of money and decisions would be made around that pot of money to invest in all the activities, all the non-medical activities that are delivered in communities. So all of your work. And when all of those activities were running well and funded and supported and had great people involved, then at that point you would have you'd be meeting lots of needs already because people would just be finding you. And there may well be other people who are going to their GP, maybe over and over again. You might hear this term frequent flyers. And their GP is not able to help them. They're not able to give them that social support. So at that point, there would be a brilliant system that would be able to move those people from the GP practice into your services and into your projects and organisations with support, with somebody to help them on that journey. They would then land in your organisation, have this brilliant experience, maybe go on to volunteer, maybe go on to contribute back in the community. They'd be moved away from that doctor's front door because actually the doctor wasn't meeting their needs. And then that person would develop and grow as an individual and be able to contribute back to society as well. And it would all be a beautiful utopia. And in reality, there's lots of different elements to that. And I don't think anywhere in the country is working like that all the time brilliantly. And so we have to, as organisations, it's really important to work out which bit are you interested in. So are you interested in that community development type funding so that you can grow and create your organisation in the best way so you're ready to receive new people, so you've got capacity? Are you interested in the systems stuff of it, so the organising of how and where the money's spent, or organising of how you move that person from one place to the right place? Are you interested in the volunteer aspect of it? Are you interested in the actual social prescribing, the activity of socially prescribing? So working with individuals to signpost them or to take them to the right places, because all of those things have different like mechanisms around them. So social prescribing is, as a program, as a concept, is quite a big one, and lots of those bits won't be relevant to you. So if you're in an organisation and you want to work with 20 people a week and you don't have the funds to work with 20 people a week, actually investing a lot of time in knowing the social prescribers and getting lots of referrals through may or may not be useful for you. It may be detrimental to you.
Is that because you could be getting, and we all know this happens, people, not necessarily just social prescribers, will refer, brilliant, that works, bang, 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 sending everybody over, but actually with no extra budget, with no money to help anybody, and you can fall over.
Exactly.
You've got too many people.
Yeah. And in an ideal world, those that referral and the funding would be a connected thing. So whoever's making the decisions about the money will know where the need is, where the increased need is, and be able to put more money into that as and when it comes. But it doesn't always work like that. And sometimes the systems around that don't work as quickly as that happens in communities. So I would say if you're interested in the funding part of social prescribing, just do what you're doing. Look at small grants, look at, there's not some magic social prescribing pot of money. What normally happens, or often happens, is that the bit of that community development funding that's part of the whole programme often gets passed on to people like CVSs, and those small grants that you see in communities, they're often the money to fill those small pots is coming through social prescribing programs. So I would really focus on just doing that small grant, doing that development work that you'll have started doing already probably. And when you're ready, when you feel like you need more people, or you want more people, or you've got more capacity, then I think starting to, so directly contacting GP practices is a great idea, but also those social prescribers will be doing a lot of networking, a lot of going to kind of community networks, because they need to know who to prescribe to, and they can't do that on the internet or just sat in an office. So they'll be out there. So go to your community networking events, ask your CVSs, what are the social prescribing contacts, those kind of things, but only you can spend a lot of time building those relationships. So I think the first thing is to identify which bit of social prescribing interests you. And you can do social prescribing without the system as well. That's the other thing. If you're really interested in doing that, like one-to-one support work with people or getting the right people to your services, you're probably doing that already. You don't necessarily need to be part of a bigger system. The system needs you to be part of its system. So you're kind of more important than the system is. And yeah, I think finding the right time to connect into the system is
it's really interesting hearing that, because a lot of the people, when I think about, take for example our Time to Grow program that we've run for the last couple of years, we've helped 115 women changemakers to develop and grow social enterprises, and well over 50% of those are in health and wellbeing, many are in learning and development. So we are doing all of that, and we've found money from elsewhere to do all of this stuff.
There's not enough money in social prescribing to run that utopia social prescribing.
But if you're, so I can think of people that we work with who do have some funding, but need to find those referrals, need to find people who are either in crisis or struggling with specific things. So they would be more appropriate to look at social prescribing.
Yeah, connect in, just share what you're doing, build relationships.
And I guess the reason I mentioned Time to Grow is sometimes, one of the ways that I would feel more confident about going to talk to these people now is the depth and the scale to which we're doing things, the amount of impact measurement we've got, and the amount of data demonstrating the improved health and well-being, sense of calm, making better decisions. There's all sorts of things that we've been tracking.
Yeah, so I think on that point, it wouldn't be the social prescribing link worker that you would need to speak to, because they're the bit that gets the person to the community project rather than the bit that chooses who funds the community project. So the commissioners, and commissioning just means making decisions around where money's spent. And there are commissioning teams in councils and in all big institutes. Getting in to influence those commissioning teams can be again, it's about relationships, and it's about
a quick example. We were talking about this before, of like, and it might be just Charlotte, that we think, oh God, where on earth do we start with this? If I think about how we've developed a link with Manchester City Council's work and skills team, no idea how we first came across people in that team years ago, but we were obviously networking, we were running about, we were chatting about showcasing what Flourish does and what we do, and they've obviously picked up on what we're up to and the impact of that. So years ago, when we were doing stuff, and they said they wanted to invest in things, but it was, who are these characters? Are they really any good? they did spend the time finding out about who we were and what we were up to. And whilst they weren't prepared to take a risk on investing in some big contract back then, we ran 4, I had a headache, think about it. We ran 4 successful crowdfund campaigns 4 years in a row, which gave us a bucket for these commissioners that weren't ready to jump on us yet, to have a vehicle to put some cash in the pot and be linked and be part of what we did. So those 4 successful crowdfund campaigns that people like Manchester City Council, One Manchester, the universities and others that we've been talking to had a vehicle to put money in. And then year on year, when they saw what we were doing and the success of it, they then invited us to maybe do some consultancy and a piece of research for like 3 to 5 grand to sort of test us out on that sort of thing. Or they then might throw 12 grand at us to run a particular project or program. And then that snowballs and sort of doubles because we're doing double the work. So I can see from what you're saying how from small acorns and developing bits of relationships with certain commissioners of types of money, there's so many different types of commissioners, aren't there? It's incredible really when you think about it. And that's why we do a lot of stakeholder mapping and stakeholder engagement work to get people to try and see the nooks and crannies in the big picture. You can then, like you were saying, find the bit that works and find the bit that you can do. And in my head, and I'm sure up in a minute, we never saw ourselves as a health and wellbeing organisation. It was only when Nicci started doing our social value measurement work, we realised the extent to which we were impacting both health and wellbeing and the economy and the other impacts. But I guess enterprise and helping people find their route to income generation and living a sustainable, resilient life is all part of the puzzle. I know not everybody's doing that here, but it's interesting to think about this stuff as more than health and well-being. It's quite a broad picture, isn't it? So
I think just one tiny point on that. If you want to find who the commissioners are, hello. So every societal problem that there is, there'll probably be a commissioner attached to it. Thank you. So if you are doing stuff around inequality or racial justice or women's work or children, any kind of any place where there's a societal problem, hopefully there will be a commissioning team or a commissioner that has that as part of their remit. And the way to find that out is to, might not be the most sexy thing in the world, but read the policies. So go on the websites, download their vision, their like big plan for the next 5 years, or and maybe do it with health and the council and any other big bodies like hospitals and things in your area, and just work out where you sit in that, and that will help you find the bit of the system that's going to invest in you or that you can influence. And all of those documents are publicly available. So.
I was going to just ask if we can go back a step and just explain what we mean by commission.
Yeah, so just organising of money. So commissioning, there's commissioning cycles. So if you Google commissioning cycle, you'll see a nice model. And usually it's kind of finding where the need is. So there'll be some work around finding where the need is, who's doing that work already, or where the emerging issues are coming from. And then directing budgets in ways to meet those needs. And the commissioners have a certain amount of influence and responsibility around their money, and it depends which system they sit in, to which policy they report to, or which bit of their structure they report to. But commissioning often seems like you say, like this smoke and mirrors. And it's just people making decisions about where money should be spent based on the needs that they've seen or researched or have available to them.
Nicci, would you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about commissioning, give you a bit of history on it and sort of how it works and how you can access it. All goes back to about 2010. The government brought out a paper called Opening Public Services, and that looked at the fact that maybe, it was Department of Health, maybe the NHS isn't the best person to deliver public services, and therefore let's commission it out, so let's contract it out. But that's why the department that I worked with Department of Health, was formed, which was to develop social enterprise within the NHS, and basically being because there was a big panic when the government said they were going to contract everything out. And the panic was that the private sector were just going to make loads of money out of the NHS. At the time, we actually contacted all the primary care trusts, which are no longer there, but to see how many contracts are they delivering, working in partnership with social enterprises, and it was about 6%, and they wanted to get it to 60%. So there was a big government launch of developing social enterprise in the health sector, and that was initially called the Public Service Mutuals Programme, and it gave the ability for people who work for the NHS to request to spin out their service as a social enterprise, and they got guaranteed contract for 3 years, funding and loan. There was 78 million put into this at the time. It crossed over then to the Cabinet Office, so it became anybody who worked for public services could request to set up a social enterprise. And this is sort of the arena that I sort of studied in terms of social enterprise, which is the delivery of public service contracts with the Mutuals Programme. The Mutuals Programme ended because the government changed and they wiped social enterprise out of the government department, which is such a shame. But what we did get through was something called the Public Services Social Value Act, which came about in 2012. And it was basically, the wording of it was that any government department wanting to procure the public services had to consider the social, economic and environmental impact of that contract. Mouthful. So of course everyone just sat scratching their heads going, what does that actually mean? It's only really in the past sort of 5 years this is completely completely blown up, I suppose, and that's because the government started to take it seriously and started to put a requirement within commissioning contracts to report social value. That's happened sporadically, council by council, over the last 5 years, but now we actually have the government's actually committed to it nationally. And so now, if a contract comes out, so first of all, in terms of commissioning, what does that mean? I can tell you more in terms of the NHS. And so the NHS has the NHS constitution that says they have to deliver services, they're strategic services. It means they have to deliver those by law. And they look at then commissioning those out. It's more relevant in community provision than it is in what we call acute provision, which is hospitals. So hospitals, although they do have some ranges of commissioning and contracting, it's more likely within community services. And so they tend to, in terms of policies, you're right, the best thing to do is to look at sort of the policies to understand. So that's a 5-year forward view with the NHS, and that will set out their priorities for the next, as I probably got about 2 years left on it.
And not only are they great for thinking about these things, when we talk to people about PESTEL reports and strengthening your need and demand, you want to talk to your own community, but you absolutely want to be knowing what strategically people are saying as well. So that's how this comes to time. Yeah. So it links to the policy, and then the commissioners nationally and locally are responsible for putting out those contracts, which is on a tender base.
So you said you were going to talk a little bit about how people might be able to access some of those contracts, what practical steps people can take.
Okay, so it's not easy, is the first thing. There's no sort of magical advertising place where you would find that.
I suppose there are portals and things when you get to a certain point, but lots of organisations are too small to go for some of those things, or they're not within groups or working alongside larger partners. So, you know, finding people who are in a position to go for that sort of opportunity is sometimes one of the routes to learning about this stuff, because
Charlotte,
even if you can't go
dip in there.
yeah.
I just want to bring it right back down.
Yeah.
With that probably on first step. I don't know if you've taken that. I'm
Yeah.
really happy with that one.
There.
So I'm sat listening to this and I work in the system like, you know, what that might just be me, but if we bring it to, there's two things you can do tomorrow or today when you can look up on the internet thriving communities learning together program. That learning to, I'll put links down, I'll send you an email to you. Then it's thriving community. So thriving, so there's a National Academy for Social Prescribing, which is supporting community activity providers like yourself on how to link in with social prescribing, but just in general around funding, around how you evidence what you're doing is having an impact, you know, infrastructure, safeguarding policies, all these things. That is what they've been put in place for, because they recognised that a lot of social prescribers was being invested in, and they needed to support the communities. So I'll send information on that, and there is a network in Greater Manchester that you can link into. And the lead on that, he works, is called Bruce Poodle, and he works in a BCSE organisation himself. We've got so many years of experience in this. Self-CVS. And the other one is that if you identify a social prescribing link worker through your GP practice or through your BCSE organisation, what they are often the first people to realise there's a gap in the community. So if you're unsure where you fit in that landscape, like Kerry was mentioning before, and whether is there actually a gap for us in social prescribing, or should we look at other sort of directions, they will know, because they're the ones getting people through and knowing whether there's somebody who can respond to that need. So having that relationship, I would agree with you, don't spend month and month to try and get them in talk, but have that conversation open, because as well, a lot of the challenges are that people have an activity and nobody knows about it. And you might have a website, but unless the right people look at that website, it's not, you know.
Can I just ask a really quick question in relation to that? Do you think that the commissioners, the people on the ground, i.e. us, and social prescriber link workers, all have the same idea of the need in the community?
So what I do find is the link workers do see that, if they know the area and they're not new to the role, they definitely know that, because they live in the community and they work in the community. I think the commissioners often as well, so data is becoming a bigger thing now, and everybody's using data to try and figure out what does it look like on the ground. But you guys, you don't need the data, because you know already, you breathe it, what the commissioners do.
I think also it's not just health data, is it? Like,
No.
we know that our environment and the transport links and our schooling and all of those like wider determinants of health impact on where the need is, and all of those systems aren't all joined up or don't talk to each other. So I think, you know, that insight sharing and intelligence sharing, if you can find places where you can constructively share that insight, that makes you really valuable as well, and a really great contact.
Something we did just on that, and we could potentially create more of this if we found the right people and knew the right things to look at. But, you know, as a result of doing a little piece of policy work with the GMCA, I think it's called CVS, 10GM, with their role in 10GM, which is like an alliance of CVSs of Greater Manchester. They knew that the people at the GMCA who were looking at recommissioning women's centres, they'd done all sorts of stuff, they knew all sorts of stuff, but they still needed more depth to kind of their knowledge and insight from women affected by, you know, criminal justice systems as victims or perpetrators. So we ended up doing this very quick turnaround piece of work through COVID, where we engaged with 200 people. They came to us because we've got the reach. And so what I'm meaning is there are all sorts of things where commissioners or people need opportunity, space, or reports that create insight. We're a very good space for that. And we often talk about getting paid to do the research that you need to find out and the relationship that you need to find out anyway. And doing those sorts of consultations can be a way of that. But what that led to, you know, we knew, you know, certain commissioners, they're busy over here, they've got enough to do. We found and created money to develop this thing called the Ellie programme. We might have written this document and said we need to do this, this and this, or you need to do this, this and this, or somebody needs to take these recommendations on board, knowing full well that it could be falling on deaf ears, or it could take years to stack stuff up. We think, well, what have we got in our gift to do? And so that's why we thought, well, we support people with enterprise and leadership and being sustainable, and we recognise the women's support sector, support people around domestic abuse and health inequalities, and you know, living in hardship and poverty and all sorts of things. We could help the semi-fragile women's support sector be better skilled and more sustainable. So that's what we did. But it strikes me that across our sector, you know, the VCSE sector, with an F in there as well, I've got some very talented people that can create that insight in those groups of areas, and we probably don't do it. I mean, there's all sorts going on at any given time, isn't there? But it's a way of building trust, creating space, and getting this cross-sector strategic leadership happening. That's what we found from the Ellie programme, was although we ran this enterprise and learning, innovation and influencing type programme for the women's support sector, and we had 35 to 40 of tiny one-man banter, the Pankhurst Trust, YEN and everyone in between. The commissioners did come back and get involved and listen and take the stuff on board. So it's just giving a case study to, you know, some of what you've described there, and how probably as a sector, that's in different ways, we could be thinking about useful ways to do more of that where there's a need, or you know, where those budgets exist.
And I think that's kind of where we get back to the contract commissioning, because the contract commissioning isn't like grant giving. It's contracts for maybe longer term pieces of work, or where the commissioners have generally decided these are the kind of things we want to buy, and we're going out to see who could deliver those things. And sometimes, even if you're a small group, you can do that in partnership, and there's often things around community consultation tenders that are available and things, aren't there? So I don't know if you want to go back to it.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a curveball in as well. Having worked in the commission arena for so long, commissioners are strange beasts is probably what I'm going to say to you here. I've had an opportunity to train them in social value, and I'll just give you a snippet of what they said to me, which will probably put it in perspective for you. So they couldn't get their head around social value, and in their terms, social value is the added value of a contract, and that's the terms, that's how they see it. But their response was, well, why would we want added value if we're actually just contracting for them to deliver? So that gives you an idea of commissioners' brains. Basically, they're there to commission to procure a service, and they want that service met. It's only with the force of having the social value working there, and there's around 30%. When you go for a contract to deliver public services, it's weighted in sections. And so the areas that they weight it on is technical skills to deliver, value for money, resilient organisations, social value now. 30% of the contract of sort of whether you win the contract or not is based on whether you can prove your social value. So it's really changed the landscape for social enterprise, which is what it was supposed to do originally.
But we all may or may not be best prepared to
it is
play our
so
part.
there's 4 areas of income generation that I work with, and one of them is preparing organisations for commissioning. There's an awful lot you have to do, and
if you aren't already, you get to a point where over time you are doing this stuff, but a lot of the people we work with might be, you know, 0 to 3, 0 to 5 years in their sort of development, and so it can take that long to work out who you are, what you're doing, what your product, services or outcomes are, then be able to be in a position to even, you know, start to move forward a little bit further.
So if you do want to sort of develop yourself in that way for commissioning, then obviously come and talk to me. I can let you know. But the biggest curveball that I'm going to say now is personal health budgets and what we call integrated care budgets now. So
I was wondering, there's buzzwords on there, and I'm thinking,
yeah, I'm going to
those are
explain
the
those
terms
to
I
you.
know, how are the two things?
So back in that time when we were looking at everything in terms of commissioning public services out, Department of Health started to work on personal health budgets, and what that meant was instead of somebody accessing NHS services, they got their own budget,
Like
to
going to a
improve
day
their
centre
health.
and this sort of thing.
So we worked on the initial sort of personal health budgets. They sort of started with what we call continuing healthcare, which is the rehabilitation. If you go into hospital and you have 6 weeks rehabilitation, it was the easiest one to do. So people could actually, instead of just having one physiotherapist visit, you know, they could buy as much as they wanted, basically. It then went out to people with long-term conditions, and that was sort of the major trial with personal health budgets. And around £37,000 a year was claimed per personal health budget. It got to looking at mental health, and it got a bit messy because it crossed over with social care. It wasn't just health. And at the time, social care wasn't in a place, or actually they stamped their feet a bit, really, to be honest. And so what the local authorities did at that time was to bring together something called a joint strategic needs assessment. And that's basically putting a pound sign over everybody's head in terms of their health and social care needs. Okay, it's taken a while to bring personal health budgets and integrated care budgets together. But that's happening this year. And there's a lot of pilots going on in terms of integrated care budgets. So people can now, and this is where it's going to change commissioning for the future.
And just on that joint strategic needs assessment stuff that you talked about, the reports in every area that they create, are they annually? I'm not sure, but there are reports that are a vital intelligence tool for lots of different people, and they're really helpful for you in if you've not looked at these things before for your area or an area that you might want to work in, to give you some insights and that intel and a sense of what.
I've actually got a presentation with me that I can go through on the round table. I'm actually doing some work with integrated care budgets in terms of assistive technology, which is equipment for people who are disabled. So basically these budgets, it's taken us years. What people don't know is you can actually yourself request a personal health budget now. You have to go to your GP and say to them, I want a personal health budget, which is a conflict of interest in itself because you're asking the GP to pull away from NHS services, but you have a right to.
Is there a way that the organisations can make use of that information?
Yeah, so what's going to happen this year is that it's all going to come together. So social prescribing is going to link into integrated care budgets. So they've been sort of operating in different, they've been sort of operating from, got personal health budgets, integrated care over here, through to social prescribing over here. The social prescribing has been meeting in the organisations that can deliver. Integrated care budgets here will provide people with the budget to purchase their own services, usually within mental health as well. It's worth sort of thinking about that. So we're not going to have block contracts that much anymore, because people will be individually accessing budgets. And
is that your understanding of things?
Question.
Yeah.
As an organisation,
yeah.
So an organisation that's funded to deliver a project, that's a whole load of new systems and processes if the person's going to have to pay them to
hence why, so obviously with profit for purpose, that's what we've been doing since sort of working the personal health budgets. So developing social enterprises to be able to trade.
What about for charities or?
Yeah, charities as well. So the big organisation I'm working with at the moment is Flourish Together in Manchester, and so they're currently commissioned So they provide occupational therapy assessments for assisted
And all the
technology.
admin that goes alongside
Exactly,
that.
yeah.
Is there
That's why it's a
provision?
different world, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
In terms of how you manage it. I've got probably about 35 organisations working with it at the moment.
Okay.
But they have to be structured.
So
in a
in
specific
one
way.
borough of Greater Manchester, there's about 1,500 organisations. So 30, that's a lot of organisations to kind of bring up to speed.
Yeah, it is. It's scary. It really is. I mean, and that's why really, I mean, that's the whole point why I set up my organisation, because there are a lot of the bigger organisations. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've worked with some huge commissions, all the primary care trusts. So I spun out a lot of the primary care trusts into what became sort of the CCGs, PCNs, and now obviously the integrated care boards. And so a lot of sort of huge contracts, and even for people who deliver the contracted work on a block contract, this is a real challenge, because instead of sort of those contracts are eventually going to vanish, and it's going to be individuals purchasing health and social care themselves, which is why social prescribing is so important, and the link workers are so important.
Any thoughts? Because you were listening very patiently there. Do you have any sort of conflicting thoughts, views, or agreements, or anything?
No,
else?
I
Can I
think,
go
what was
with
your name again?
Nicci.
Nicci, I think it sounds like Nicci definitely knows a lot more about that than I do. I'd be keen for our personal health budget guy in our team to get in touch with you, because he works with the different localities around getting more people to use personal health budgets, but it sounds like there's a lot of restrictions. So basically the idea is that you still have access to your acute care and all that. So it's not like you are no longer able to go to A&E or go to your GP, but if you do need long-term rehab or social care into your home, you can get those monies and you can identify the person that you want to come into your house, so it's not different people every week, etc. So that is what sort of, and for the health budget, it's about, health things. So the idea with that is, so if you're delivering like the farm, the therapeutic interventions in a farm, whatever it is, then they could choose, rather than some low-level mental health therapy, they could go and spend the money on that.
So, so is that open to any individual?
So this is where we are not sure. This is where Nicci.
So it's
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. That's why they were off. I felt like you were sat in the dark. But I know. Are you all right in the dark over there?
We just on a crossover for that integrated budget scenario.
right.
But they still
it's not
talk about personal health.
It's not that, because we have people who are not known to social services, or they're not currently known to, it's like the GP surgery would provide them whatever basic services that they need, but they're coming to us for a different reason, because it's there's a gap.
Totally. Well, that's what this is supposed to. So you would request a personal health budget. There's a nurse assessor. It's actually called the Manchester model that they use, and they will assess that person's health and social care needs. Then that's an indicated budget together. So it's an indicated budget, and this is the interesting one, it's managed by a broker. So there's a real interesting route for us as a sector to become brokers for integrated care budgets, which is what I set up in from a set,
Which would be commissioned then, presumably.
it's £500 per assessment.
That's really interesting. That's what we found we're doing. It is brokerage.
So it's really important.
Signposting.
So there's quite a lot of funding out there in this arena.
Feels like the timing is, when I sit here, you can, if you've worked in this world, I say whatever that means, the VCSD sector around health and wellbeing organisations of varying sizes, it can feel like, oh my God, I tend to give up and walk away and just get on with helping people set up social ventures to become as sustainable and independent as possible, because I've known this has taken a very long time to come pass, and there's some hurdles yet, I would imagine, to get there. But
well, without legislation, which is the biggest thing, they had to change, like obviously changed NHS legislation, but it's always been there in a way. There's section 13 of the NHS Constitution that states that somebody can request in bulk their funds that will have to be put in trust to manage their own health care. It's always been there.
Is it restricting funds, the personal health budget?
The personal health budget is based on it's based on what they would have accessed if they were to access the traditional route of public services. So it's, but then in pilots, some of them amazing, you know, so somebody who's struggling to breathe or a COPD, in the pilots they had air conditioning fitted in the home, and the help was solved like that. You know, some people that were suffering from loneliness and maybe anxiety and depression, you know, to get a prescription to go to the gym, get a taxi down to the community centre, buy in their own therapy. But the most important thing, they can buy in things like arts, and they can buy in walking sessions, etc.
Can I just point out, at the moment, the cost of living, people are really struggling financially, and there's not, you know, there doesn't seem to be support with budgeting. There isn't, I don't feel that.
Yeah, so that's another one that they could identify.
So if this integrated care package will exist, then I'm just wondering if it will, like, you know, have a pot specifically for it.
It has already. So it's there, and it's been there for a long, long time.
I think what you're asking is, will they be able to spend it on anything?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
will that be
This is the
problematic
interesting.
if the person's spending it on food instead of the care, and then they're not getting care because they
Right, so that's why it needs to have a broker. So in the first trials that we did, the broker was responsible for managing all of that and managing the budget. So first of all, it's about going out and doing this assessment, and the broker got paid sort of £500 to do the assessment with the individual. Then obviously it goes back to what was the CCG then. They sort of tick it off. The whole thing about it is that it's not restricted. So in social care at the moment, there are independent budgets for social care, and they're ring-fenced. And that's where the clash came. So basically, the local authority had sort of like organisations that you had to go to. Personal health budgets don't have that, and integrated care budgets won't either. And that's where it will link into the social prescribing and link workers who develop those relationships already with individuals.
So it sounds like we need another session once it's all figured out.
Can I just come in quickly? So this may all feel really overwhelming. I just want to like recognise that you're not set up to understand this whole system. If this whole system is shifting and moving, it's their responsibility to make this easy to you. Not unless you want to get involved in the influencing part of it. It's really good to be aware of all the context, but your specialism and the things that you're brilliant at are what your organisations are based around, and it's much more important that you focus on developing that and making sure that's working really well, and you've got the right people and processes and procedures and stuff around that work. So it's important to know where the money might come from and to understand some of these systems, but I do think you can get lost in it a little bit and feel really like you can't do what you're doing because you don't, or because that all feels too big. And actually, I just want to say that I know lots of you, and you're all really good at what you're doing, and it's really, that's why the systems want it, because it's really good and really special. So it's the system's responsibility to make this work for you if you're going to be part of this landscape, which they know you need to be. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. For me, I took my hat off of being like a registered entrepreneur. Just had my daughter hat on and my
friend of the people that I've met through my community groups, which a lot of the time are older, and like seeing them as vulnerable customers that might not be informed and missing out on social opportunities because it's all individualized and they're going to buy this product. And I just got this horrible dystopia vision. So I think that's where I got to go.
Shoulder, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I worked on one of the pilots in Wirral, where we put a lot of money into developing those things with a primary care network and rural primary care from Europe, who were actually a social enterprise, who sort of worked on a pilot of linking into the link workers and so they employed in the GP surgery wellbeing workers, you know, and they worked with the patients in order to do that brokerage.
And I guess it can feel very overwhelming is one word, frustrating is another, where these things are always a bit of a postcode lock as to where gets piloted with certain things, and who's got more knowledge and intelligence or is a bit further advanced on some of this stuff than other areas, and you've just got to have the sort of patience to keep chipping away.
Can I say, as well as an organisation that sits with commissioners on looking at weekly check contracts, and you've done this over many years, Stockport and the changes that's happening there, it's interesting because I know that they're due for renewal, so it's due to be looked at soon. So it will be interesting what comes through on Watch Yes and whatever else is happening. But I did a talk with Penang Care commissioning officers and GM about the new transfer way of working for people with SMI, which is serious mental illness. So part of my concern in regarding to social contracts for people is the fluctuating capacity for some individuals. So we only work with serious mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, that should be dealt with within secondary care provision. But because the secondary care provision is now changing, more people are then going to be coming into the community and looking at the social prescribing. And you mentioned viaduct care. I did do a 20-minute speech on viaduct care. And part of that conversation that I had was, why do we still have top-down services? Why do you want to continue to refer what you consider to be people with severe complexity of need, dual diagnosis that we work with constantly, got a lot of experience with personally. So you want to refer people to us because we work, and we've worked for 20 odd years, keeping people out of A&E, out of readmission to hospital. Who better to know if somebody's triggering into psychosis than the group that I'll be sat with tonight, and we'll see if somebody's becoming unwell or not. So it's about how do we then make sure the fairness, because the service users will trickle down, but the money doesn't trickle down with them. So we're not going to be taking any further people on because I'm not going to put people at risk. We've got capacity, we're at that capacity. So it's about how we get equity throughout this process happening. It's all right saying, well, I'll set up a social enterprise and we can do this, but do people actually understand if there's real complex cases coming through, where does the responsibility for that lie? With the organisation, with the broker. I've seen brokers before and I've turned money down for brokers. And that is a very big, complicated piece of work of, does somebody have capacity? Are they under a court of protection? Which many people are under a court of protection. Which is why we need to commission organisations like yourself in the community.
But then what happens to the if you commission an organisation like this to do that brokerage,
You can't do it.
they're not just sitting around waiting for
which is actually lived experience. Every single individual within our organisation is lived experience. We don't have outside workers that come in, it's all experts by experience. Some with 50, 60 plus years of it.
That's very sort of a matrix on even generations. So again, that's what we work on. with an organisation. So, you know, there's 4 different areas. You've got your direct trading, which actually personal health budgets do come in under rather than commission. You've got your commission and block contracts because they'll still be specialist services. And in terms of SMI, you know, they would still remain in
dual
block
diagnosis.
contracts.
Yes, that
obviously.
biggest unmet need that
Yeah.
we've got.
I think, but then there'll be, so you know, you've got your 4 tiers within mental health.
Yeah.
So it'll be sort of tier 3 level, rather than sort of those with the practical organisers.
I know it's all changing. I know that Penang Care's just brought some more care workers on board to put them in GP services. I got the list out yesterday. So for 12 GP services, there was 1 worker. So that's going to be quite interesting how that's actually going to work out.
So it'd be interesting in terms of the wellbeing workers, and I've seen this is happening already, certainly in my surgery. And so the wellbeing worker will identify the need to book an appointment with the mental health worker at the GP service. And then they will refer from that point of view. That's certainly what's happening in Manchester in my surgery. And then they're referring into either SMI services or into sort of more mental health support.
I think apart from the people that will just turn for A&E anyway.
So I think
Sorry,
yeah,
some of the
we
areas there
can
that-
troubleshoot and go into great depth this afternoon. But what would be really good, obviously we're hearing how complex and constantly shifting the systems are, which, you know, it is the state of affairs, it would be the way it is. So we were thinking from the panel as to what the advancements might be for organisations and their beneficiaries. You know, why might people want to do this? You know, given that it's quite a difficult thing to get into and it is complex and shifting.
I don't think it's a choice of whether to get into it or not. I think you're already doing the social prescribing bit, and actually the systems need to work themselves out around you guys. So whilst if there was a pot of money, right, if it was a social prescribing pot of money, and it was going to help you deliver your work really well and connect in with the people so that the right people could get your work, I would definitely say develop so that you can go for that pot of money. And those pots of money do exist, don't they?
I've got one here actually.
Yeah.
There's one.
Excellent.
So there are lots
We
of
could have fiscal names and we could all dive in.
So I think as long as you think understanding the concept of what social prescribing is, so connecting people to the right kind of support in communities, like we all get that, right? We all understand that actually it's the human to human stuff, and it's the social support, and it's the lived experience, it's the conversations and the peer support that actually makes a difference to people's lives. So there's nothing to get in terms of what social prescribing is. I think the bits to understand are how can you link in with the person so that they can refer people to you. And there's loads of different referral systems, and there's community connectors, and there's link workers, and there's lots of different signposting teams, and maybe it's about developing some relationships there. And there's the community development bit of it, so the money bit. So how are you going to get funding to be able to deliver services that those people can benefit from? And again, it's looking at what's going on locally, looking at CVS websites, looking at you know, there's lots of funding bulletins and things that you can get on the lists of. So I don't think it's really now we're going to do social prescribing. I would say you are already doing social prescribing.
And you might not be using local money to do it, because you're not a link doesn't exist. You might be using the National Lottery, or you might be generating a profit here to reinvest it there. There's lots, you know, it's not being reliant on waiting for some bucket of money that's not there yet. As well.
And I think if you want to get in with if you really care about this stuff and think that actually there's voices not being heard in that organising of that and the influencing part of it, I think that's a slightly separate conversation, but it is really about you gathering your own data and impact and intelligence about your work and why it matters, and then trying to find the relationships where you can share that.
Can I just one question? So from what I'm gathering, 'cause I've been talking about the sector for a few years. So what I'm gathering, so the landscape has changed with the way that previously. So for example, I did work on a social prescribing project years ago, and we'd set it up. We had no money. We started doing it. There was definitely the need there. It was miles of smiles. I don't know whether anyone.
Yeah.
The need was there, and then very, very quickly we got asked to do a pilot, and that was council who came to us, and then that went on and on. It's still going. It's very successful.
Was it the adult health and social care team of the council?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really integrated.
So I think the question is this still that way of doing it? Because we've got a project that identified a need. People are coming in. We've got no money for it.
Yeah.
We have got the capacity to deliver if we knew if we could run it as a pilot or whatever. Is there any way then that I could do it the way that I did all those years ago, where I just got an audience with our local council? Because it isn't something that's fitting with. We look at funding bulletins, and I've not identified anything where it sort of fits.
I would read the policy, find out from
Right.
it. So
Yeah.
if their priority is to do X, and you can work out how your project meets
demonstrate.
X.
Okay.
Although I would say I've got quite a lot of pilot projects that are funded by regional communities on social prescribing. So I've got prescribed befrienders. I've got sort of prescribed occupational therapy stuff. So there is quite a bit of funding out there that will fund it, because the problem is at the moment is that it's great being referred to a service, but if you're not getting paid to deliver it,
It could only go.
then
so
how can it
far,
be sustainable?
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of funding that appreciates that, because they know what's coming.
Right.
And I think in terms of the council's then recognition of that funding, so you could go and find a national funder to fund your project,
Yeah.
and your
The lottery,
projects could
Paul
be
Hamlin,
bringing in,
Joseph Roundtree, those
Yeah.
sorts of things.
it could
Yeah,
be bringing in
yeah.
loads of benefit to that council. Actually, those council workers could be benefiting from the fact that you're doing that project. Then how would they know? How would they know that you're doing it? So I think the drawing in that national funding or other funding pots is really important. But if your main aim is to get your service commissioned on a contract so that it turns into a miles and smiles type contract, then you've got to do that bit as well.
Yeah, so that's
Yes.
what's really important is the social accounting
Yeah.
in terms of that. So we deliver that as part of the pilot prior to applying for the funding. We do
Yeah.
a social return and investment forecast, which is what I do with my clients. So
And I guess that was
Cheers.
that was kind of the point I was alluding to with the question, is like, what's the benefits of getting into this, what sounds, potentially a bit complicated with work, and it's the fact it can become something that's sustainable and repeatable. That's the
And we're
benefit.
natural innovators and change makers, and there are, you can build a relationship with the powers that be, whatever faction, learning and skills, health, environment, whatever. You can be building a relationship with them whilst meet mutual needs. They need insights and intel and reaching communities. You need the same, and so even developing these relationships early on can really stand you in good stead. To be in the right place at the right time, and to even know about some of this stuff, or to have proved your worth through a pilot of whatever kind of size to help progress things along, and those things can be really helpful.
I'm conscious of time, I'd like to take some questions at the end, but first it'd be really good to hear from the panel an example of a project that you've worked on that has worked really well in this area. There's a bit of a case study that people can take away.
Well, can I just quickly, before I do that, just say from a GMY perspective, there is hope. Because with it being transformed into the integrated care partnerships, there is recognition by people that for us to remove or attempt to remove health inequalities, we need the community activities and we need to work on those hyper-local levels. So within the structures and within the sort of the pot of monies that are being looked at and having a key seat at the table, the voluntary sector is there now. They have to be part of that decision making. So over the, I won't help you tomorrow, but over the next 5-10 years, there will be a shift in that proper commissioning as well. So it's just, it can feel really difficult when you're in it and trying to work through it, but it is all changing, and I'll just think about that.
Example.
I've got 2 examples, one at each end. So some of you might know Made by Mortals. Amazing group. So they are a theatre company, and they work with people who are older people or people that have been disadvantaged in some way, but they work with them as actors and as theatre makers. So they see them in that capacity of creatives. Obviously it helps with social isolation, obviously it helps with connection and friendship, but actually the really exciting thing about their work is their theatre is about things that are wrong with the system often. So they'll do a piece of theatre about care homes, or they'll do a piece of theatre about listening to people around conflict resolution in care systems, or something like that, and they'll use the lived experience and the ideas and creativity of their group, and then they'll perform that theatre to policymakers, decision makers, commissioners.
What's it called? It's got a name, this theatre.
Legislative
That's
theatre.
the one. Legislative theatre.
And to help shift and influence and change the minds of the people who are making decisions about services and where money goes. They also do this performances in schools to help educate around things like bullying and big kind of societal things. So they're fantastic. And they've been going quite a number of years now, and have a national profile, and are just really brilliant.
Fantastic podcast that Turnbull produces, and they have these stories, so it means that they can tell stories to children.
Armchair Adventures.
That's the one.
Oh, there you go.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Excellent. We get your autograph later.
So that's the first one. I just want to tell you about another one, which is like really emergent, really new. So there's a very new CIC called Roll to Recovery, which I'm really excited about. And it's set up by a guy called Roll to Recovery. It's set up by a guy called Michael, who struggled with addiction recovery. He was in the army. He's very like kind of macho man, but has had to reteach himself about his conditioning and about emotion and things. But he does mixed martial arts, which, you know, on the face of it doesn't seem like a particularly therapeutic thing. But there's a particular type of mixed martial arts called submission grappling. Again, it doesn't sound great, but it's all about it's very like contact. So it's bodies on bodies, and there's a lot of respect in it, as well as this kind of people trying to kill each other, basically. But the way that he talks about it is that that physical contact, that really being there with somebody, that saying thank you afterwards, and has really helped him in his addiction recovery journey, because it's often you cut yourself off, you isolate yourself, you take yourself away from people, you don't let people close, and this is all very close. So again, I think those 2 examples are really great, because the thing that makes them different from counselling or medical intervention is it's theatre, and it's submission grappling, it's the
Creativity and innovation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what you guys all do really well as well. So there's 2 examples.
Brilliant, thank you.
Oh, how do you follow that? I think I'm going to come from the point of view around not being a one-trick pony. I think is really, really helpful in all of this. You can build a relationship with somebody for years and then they move on, or you can think you're in the queue for this thing and then the system changes. So I think what we've tried to do at Flourish is have multiple mini commissioners whilst we're building up to the big cheese or cheeses or soup or whatever it might be.
Cheese board.
Yeah. But so our Time to Grow program is a good example of this. Some of you have been through our Time to Grow program. Years ago when Flourish set up, and we were the Women Supporting Social Entrepreneurs Network with our little crowdfunding campaigns and all this stuff. If you looked at what our monthly peer learning events look like, they look pretty much like a Time to Grow program. So we spent years perfecting our peer learning networks, bringing in brilliant people who we knew to kind of galvanize this network of support, knowledge, expertise in very diverse ways. And over the time, we then turn that into a program, which we've now run 4 time to grow programs, commissioned in different ways. What you can find if you're in a certain geography, or if you're with a certain commissioner, or if you're just working in health, or however, you can get kind of, this is what we're commissioning, this is what you want to do, this is how it's going to work. And most of us in the real world don't live like that. We certainly don't. So I don't just want to work with unemployed people. I don't necessarily just want to work with women, although we often do. I don't just want to work in North Manchester. We have a set of things that we do, and we want to be inclusive. That's core to kind of how we work. So I'm been forever dancing around, matching pots of money to make sure that the service that we offer to the public looks the same, however it's been diddled about with behind the scenes. So it's just recognizing that, perhaps being a one-trick pony can sort of narrow your focus or narrow your potential impact. And now, because we've, the time to grow programs that we've run, there was this sort of ESF WEA sort of money that was about learning and skills and employability development. NatWest, although I don't often advocate corporate partnerships, and we've got to get better at that, because you're like, finding the right ones can be fiddly. NatWest have been a really good partner of ours for about 3 years now, and they just help make life easier actually when we're trying to do different things. Manchester City Council have been a really good partner, and although I would like them to invest more going forward, we've built that relationship up organically, slowly, and with mutual respect, and they've not been a headache at all to work with in some of the programs that we've run, although they've kind of forced us to, and we love it, so don't take this wrong way, people from North Manchester, they forced us to work in North Manchester. Actually, that was a great thing for us, because it's brought so many benefits, working in places like this and building relationships here, reaching really diverse groups of people in North Manchester and other areas. We're never just going to work in one area, so that hopefully people of North Manchester have benefited and been enriched by what we've brought along here and how we've mixed rooms and people up. So hopefully that's enough, for now. I'm trying to think where else money's come from to make this whole thing work. But multiple straddling. The only challenge is the administration on all of these things. So it's just a word of caution. And the good thing is, because I'm a sort of social value expert like Nicci, and because I'm organised, we can set out our stall usually to say we've developed our systems, we know how we work, we know how we measure things, and we've tried to evolve them so that we're not at the mercy of the funders. We can consistently gather our data, evidence and impact in a way that works for us, rather than be like dancing around all these different kind of commissioned things. But hopefully that's helpful to give a different kind of case study.
Thank you.
Great example. Yeah, probably sort of telling you the pathway of this will help you as well if you're wanting to work within the health arena. So the organisation to go to for support is Health Innovation Manchester. I do a lot of work with I'm their social enterprise support for Health Innovation Manchester. Huge organisation, part of the AHSMs they're called, which bring together universities and NHS trusts to look at new products, new services that are advantage to the NHS. And they do something called Step into Health, which is their programme for you to step into being commissioned by health service. And they also have a procurement expert that can work with you to get into the contract.
And I was just talking to Kirsty at Yellow Beacon, who was on our programme recently, and she's been really grateful for that support and starting to put on some sort of programme that helps with all of that. Yeah, so if you want me to introduce you to the right person within Health Innovation Manchester, that's great. But I'm just going to tell you about an example through that. So we had an organisation in Oldham called they're called Outer School. Originally started providing PE sessions within schools as a social enterprise, and they were asked to start a programme for adults called Let's Get Active. And because of the programme that Health Innovation Manchester did, so at the time I was working with them,
there was a pot of money came through the CCG to trial Let's Get Active through social prescribing, which we did. Huge success, 100 people through within the first year. Used huge advantages. So basically it's an 8-week programme. It's aimed at the South Asian community, specifically women, because they're at risk of developing diabetes. However, I went in to do a social account for them, to do the account of social value process. And I found an awful lot more happening on in there than just delivering health outcomes. And so we identified through that the increased benefit to emotional and psychological health, community development. So they were coming together as a community. And so from that, we actually put in a big lottery bid to extend the programme while we're in this lull in terms of commissioning, because we're changing over from current system. And we've just got 5 years funding to continue it and expand through Oldham. Still on the social prescribing, well, it's a different route, it's the GP writing out prescription, which then goes to Let's Get Active, and then Let's Get Active cash it in, basically. Yeah, so usually successful programme. We've got another 5 years funding, which will then take them into the personal health budget arena. And so that's, I've got about 4 or 5 that are doing that at the moment, but I suppose that's the early stage ones, because it was an early stage sort of Dragon's Den opportunity that the CCG did at the time, the Clinical Commissioning Group, to invest in projects. So Health Innovation Manchester is the best bet to be able to access, and they will look at all those opportunities that are coming throughout Greater Manchester.
Oh, Charlotte, I know Charlotte's got an example.
I just wanted to share a joint commissioning example where children and young people were identified as needing more support. So children, social care and health, so what was the CCG, came together. The CCG funded the children and young people link worker, and the children's social services puts quite a big chunk of money every year for 3 years into the community to develop activities or to work with current activity providers like yourself. So there's appropriate activities for them to tap into. And the organisation who's employing those children and young people, link worker, is a charity who's got experience and knowledge of working with children already around low level mental health support, etc. So that's just how you utilise, you know, a VCSE organisation or something else, and they actually get the monies to employ the people that are needed, I guess.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've got a couple of minutes for questions, and then obviously we can all stay and continue on after lunch. So if anyone's got any burning questions they'd like to ask, Samira.
Yeah.
Okay, we like this, and I wanted the public on it. We give it to them now, and so what the reason is for the next 5 years.
And so they've got you behind the scenes helping influence how they work as like
My role is that I
yeah,
don't work for
sure, but it's like an expert panel to kind of help feedback
it's not
experience. Sorry,
it's not, it's public community can go.
yeah, of course.
We actually feed a lot of those into the social, the spin out from the NHS. We have public and community involvement roles in them on an advisory board. So very similar.
And that's, people might have their questions, wave at us if you've got them. One of the questions I don't feel like we've answered for you was like, how do you even be in the right room at the right time throughout your journey? You know, it's like you're busy with your community, and you know, it's free. You freed up time today to get here. It's weaving through what's in your interest to be where, when and how, and you've got to really carefully manage your time when it comes to networking, because otherwise you'd be running around networking, never getting paid for stuff, and be a serial networker and instead of a serial social entrepreneur or entrepreneur otherwise. But just a couple of tips on getting in the room. I think finding ways to speak at events. So you know, we're constantly having panels, events, online, offline, to create opportunities for people to polish what they say and get ready to be put in front of whoever happens to be running something, where you can get that 5 to 10 minute spiel on stuff. I think where you've got time and capacity, getting on boards, forums and working groups things, as some of you will know, we might share some experiences of things like that, helps you getting in around different people and organisations. Using your social media carefully, it might be something that we talk about later, but using social media so that there's a constant and clear, you know, using your communication channels well, so that if commissioners and people are looking for stuff and they Google or stumble across you, or somebody recommends you, that there's clear information for people to just spot what you're up to and see those case studies and have them get up-to-date information about who you are, what you're up to and the impact that you're having.
Meet the commissioner events. There was one advertised. I have to have a look at it. Maybe yesterday. So there are specialist meet the commissioner events that run through the local authority, where you can basically
find them and they're the right fit for you then, and you're ready to do that. I think sometimes early stage organisations can go and it's more of a learning and development thing rather than and I'm ready with my stuff to, you know, to be commissioned. There might be other tips on that, but I just thought, oh, it's something we've not, trying to think. And sometimes you can feel incredibly out of your comfort zone with any of this stuff, and I think just, you know, being part of a Flourish network where we gently support people along their kind of enterprise and leadership thinking and journey, or diving in on programs like the one Nicci's just described, or certain leadership programs. There are various leadership programs that pop up and prop up, things like the School for Social Entrepreneurs, things like Common Purpose, other leadership programs that might happen across borough or in certain sectors can help you build your confidence and your thinking around cross-sector working and being ready for these sorts of things.
Yeah, I do go to many different events and talk about sanctuary belongs, and people are interested. So, for example, I went to a job fair recently thinking I'm going to just get a full-time job and leave this. And then I ended up talking about sanctuary belongs to loads of care agencies, and loads of people said, oh, we've got one person that lives, you know, out in the sticks who's got these needs and he's interested in cooking, can you support him? So now I've got about 4 people, 4 different organisations that have said, yes, what you do can really help this one particular person, but they all live in various different parts of the city. They're not able to pay for the service themselves. So just wondering, like, logistically, how do we support that one person to come to us, or do we go to them?
It might be one for a chat later, but various sources, and whether it's looking at budgets, if the budgets are a right fit, or looking for local funding to pay for someone's travel expenses. There'd be 2 or 3 routes to answering that question, but I think we'd probably one we'll come back to, if that's all right.
Mine's not really a question, it's more of a shout out, and I don't know if it's appropriate here or not, but I'll tell you if it's not. But I've recently got involved with the Independent Mental Health Network in Greater Manchester. So there is anybody who's got any sort of like mental health provision and services, and they're wanting to influence how things are working with that. We're actually working with developing the community mental health framework. And there's different sort of hotspots or hubs, shall I say, around the region where they're looking for lived experience representatives. You know, they're working in collaboration with primary care networks, things like that. So then if you just want any information on that, then just give me a shout.
And they are, I'm not mentioning numbers, but they are paying you to be there, and they are paying to do that.
Yeah.
I think that can make all the difference. There's lots of places and spaces, I'm not suggesting commissioners per se, but there's lots of places and spaces where they want you to turn up for free, or they want you to turn up and be part of focus groups and whatever. And yeah, the ones that are a bit more robust around some of this stuff will be covering some of your expenses or your time to get there.
It's really good because I've been to quite a few things now, and I really do feel like I can have that impact and influence on things. But it's really good to get involved at that level. And even just last week, I was at a collaborative and I was able to talk about social enterprises in Oldham and trying to get them involved and, you know, sort of have my say on that and sort of shout out about social enterprises. And, you know, was actually listened to, so it was great. That was actually, yeah, absolutely talking about the social prescribing thing and, you know, how social enterprises can play a part in that and community assets and things. So
all the while developing your links and sort of spiel on who you might reach later through your community counselling organisation.
yeah.
Can I just say, I remember meeting you about 4 years ago. I think you
Tipples and nibbles.
Oh, it probably was then,
right
yeah.
at the beginning. And I remember you were talking about like, oh my God, how am I ever going to work with those systems and services?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's so far, and it's just so lovely to hear you talk with such like confidence and authority around like really making a difference from your perspective. You haven't had to like change yourself to be one of them. Like,
No,
you're coming
definitely
from
not.
it's just lovely.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it was actually Nickala that tagged me on a post on Twitter about the Independent Mental Health Network, and they were looking for lived experience representatives in Oldham. So it's all down to Flourish and Nickala
I
again.
don't know about that, but that's it. So, but you choose your networks that work, don't you, and the ones that have appropriate opportunities about.
Definitely.
Cool. Sorry, I feel like we're sat in the dark here, but we'll try and brighten it up.
I've just got an opportunity
Take a break, shouldn't we?
that I'm going to leave in the middle. I'm going to send you the link anyway, to you, Shelley. But this is the Big Earth Group, and it's a Manchester Social Prescribing Fund that's providing funding for you to develop your services for social prescribing. So
You need a much better plan than that.
yeah, so I've got a couple of copies here. Copies, not copies. That's me thinking about having a copy. I'm going to leave them in the middle, but I'm going to send you the link anyway. There's no deadlines on it, so it's just
Dive in a little bit. You'll be coming around.
an expression of interest. So,
You know,
we can pick them up.
So
we're around if people have got questions. We're going to say goodbye to our listeners and thank our panel. We're still going to get rowdy, so we'll just press stop. Thanks for listening.
Nicky, do you have a digital